I am thrilled with how many wonderful special guests and guest speakers we have this evening with us. So we have two people who are going to make some brief comments, and then two who are going to jump in with our presentation on SROs. So I'm going to start by introducing Jimmy Bierman. So Jimmy, if you want to turn on your camera and magically appear. There we go. Jimmy has served on the Fairfax Police Civilian Review Panel since April of 2019 and is the panel's current chair. He's an attorney with experience in private practice and the public sector. He's currently an attorney advisor in the Office of the General Counsel at the Department of Homeland Security, where he works on administrative law matters. Jimmy was born and raised in Fairfax County and also serves on the Fairfax County Redistricting Advisory Committee. And so he's going to tell us a little bit about the Civilian Review Panel.
Thanks so much, Michelle, and thank you to SEPTA for having me tonight. I didn't realize I was going to go first, but I'll take it. As Michelle said, I am the chair of the Fairfax County Police Civilian Review Panel. I'm also an attorney by trade, and I currently work at the Department of Homeland Security. I just wanted to, Sherry Belkowitz, who is a SEPTA board member, is one of my colleagues on the Police Civilian Review Panel, and she asked me to come by this evening to tell you all a little bit about what the Police Civilian Review Panel does on an evening when you would be hearing from FCPD about school resource officers and police in schools. So the Police Civilian Review Panel, the purpose of it is to enhance police legitimacy and to build and maintain trust between the citizens of Fairfax County, the Board of Supervisors, and the Fairfax County Police Department. I always like to start with the purpose because one thing that's really important in that purpose is that the goals of the Civilian Review Panel, the purpose aligns a lot of goals of a lot of different constituencies. The FCPD, the Civilian Review Panel, community activists, parents, teachers, kids, they all share a common goal, which is improving public safety and ensuring the public safety practices are carried out in a just and equitable manner. Civilian oversight is something that is a growing thing throughout the country. It's an opportunity to have different perspectives with respect to certain police activities. We have three main functions and our mandate is quite limited. So I just always throw that out there so that people understand what we can and cannot do. Our three main functions are to review certain investigations to ensure that they are complete, thorough, accurate, objective, and impartial. Those 5 words end up being said about 15 times every one of our meetings. Complete, thorough, accurate, objective, and impartial. We are looking at certain investigations. Secondly, we're to provide an independent process for initiating a complaint against an FCPD officer. And third, we're to make recommendations on law enforcement policies, practices, and procedures to assist the FCPD Chief of Police and the Board of Supervisors in policy review. So earlier I said certain investigations. What do I mean by that? Well, we shall review where the subject matter of an investigation is an abuse of authority or serious misconduct by an FCPD officer, and a review request is filed. If you're hearing me keep focusing on investigations, that's because that's actually what we look at. We look at Internal Affairs Bureau investigations of certain incidents that have been subject of a complaint. And we only get involved if the complaint is about a true abuse of authority or serious misconduct. And we only get involved if the complainant requests that we review the investigation. We don't review anything related to the use of force. That is handled by the independent police auditor. We have a bifurcated system in Fairfax County where you have a civilian review panel of up to nine civilians who review non-use of force complaints, and an independent police auditor who does review use of force complaints. We also don't review time-barred complaints. There's certain time limits. 1 year is one of the time limits after an incident. We don't review subject matter subject to criminal or civil proceedings. What is abuse of authority or serious misconduct? It's what it sounds like. It's the use of abusive racial, ethnic, or sexual language or gestures, harassment or discrimination based on race, color, sexual orientation, gender, religion, national origin, marital family status, age, familial status, immigration status, or disability. Acting in a rude, careless, angry, retaliatory, or threatening manner not necessary for self-defense. Reckless endangerment of a detainee or person in custody, violation of law or ordinances, or other serious violations of Fairfax County or FCPD policies and procedures, including the FCPD Canon of Ethics. And I'd like to note that FCPD is quite transparent with its policies and procedures. It publishes its general orders. You can Google them, you can find them online. That's not true of a lot of police departments in this country, but those general orders are out there, and there is a lot of transparency on what the rules that police officers are supposed to follow are. So panel then has three options after it reviews an investigation. It can concur with the investigation and find that it was complete, thorough, accurate, impartial, and objective. This is what frankly happens the vast majority of the time. We have seen IAB investigations where we agree with the IAB because the police department has taken action against an individual. We've seen IAB investigations where we agree with the IAB because there simply wasn't there. We have, in other instances, we can send the investigation back to the FCPD with a request for additional investigation. That happens as well. And we can inform the Board of Supervisors that in the panel's judgment, the investigation is unfounded or incomplete and request further action from the Board of Supervisors. We cannot discipline officers. We don't discipline officers. We don't have that power. And our requests for action actually go to the Board of Supervisors. So just going through a couple more procedural aspects of this. So what's the process? How are complaints and investigations initiated? There are two ways. One, a complaint is filed directly with the district office, the FCPD, or two, I mentioned earlier that we provide an independent means of filing a complaint. If you don't feel comfortable filing in your district office, then you'd file the complaint directly with the panel. The next step is that the FCPD investigates. The next step is that the FCPD sends the complainant a disposition letter with the outcome of the complaint. The next step is the complainant can request a review by the panel. Then we have a subcommittee review where we essentially determine whether or not it meets the criteria for serious abuse of authority or misconduct. And whether or not it would go to a full review of the panel. If there were a full review, we'd hold a review meeting and we'd decide on how we proceed. There are key points in that review meeting. It's not the taking of testimony, nor is it an opportunity for the complainant to question the police or the police to question the complainant. And while the meetings are public, the public doesn't participate. So with all that, I know I'm a little bit over time. I'll just end with saying one other thing, which is that really one thing that we do a lot of is we create a recommendations matrix. Now, we haven't had as many cases that have gone to a full panel review this year, but in past years, we've had a number of cases that go to full panel review. And we may agree entirely with the outcome of the investigation, but have certain recommendations that we would want to make to the police department. That goes into our recommendations matrix, which is public, and then a public conversation ensues between the police department and the police civilian review panel. I'll only end by saying that right now we have not ever had a complaint brought against a police, a school resource officer. However, we could in the future. It is something to be aware of, and yes, I see in the chat, the civilian review panel meetings are all open to the public. And with that, I'll close because I've already gone beyond my time. I apologize. Thank you.
No worries, Jimmy. We're really glad you were able to come and share more about this. And I imagine we can find information about your meetings and when they're held online.
I will drop in the chat the main panel page where you can see when our meetings are. You can look at the panel recommendations matrix, which admittedly is mostly from last year. You can read things like our 4-year review. You can read our reports and all that we do. So thank you.
Outstanding. Well, thank you very much. Again, your panel is one that I did not know existed until Sherry was talking about it as well. So we really appreciate you taking the time and sharing all this with us. I wanted to briefly introduce Chief Davis, and I'm looking to see if Chief Davis has his camera on. There we go. Hey, guys. So Chief Kevin Davis currently serves as the 11th Police Chief for the Fairfax County Police Department. He most recently led the Baltimore Police Department as the 39th Police Commissioner there from 2015 to 2018. After a period of historic unrest and during the Department of Justice's civil rights investigation. Chief Davis negotiated a federal court-ordered consent decree with the DOJ during a presidential transition of power and has substantial crisis leadership experience in a national spotlight while leading reform initiatives in mental and behavioral crisis response, the use of force, training, and technology that all have received industry attention and accolades. My tongue is just getting so twisted, I apologize. Chief Davis is a graduate of the FBI National Academy and the FBI National Executive Institute. He earned a master's degree in management from Johns Hopkins and a bachelor's in English from Towson. He's a 4th-generation public safety servant and is also local. He was born and raised in College Park, Maryland. He's an adjunct professor at American University and lectures at the Catholic University and is married and has 4 children. So hi, Chief Davis. Thank you very much for taking the time to join us this evening. And if you have anything briefly that you want to say hello to our audience, please feel free to go right ahead.
Thank you so much, Michelle. Brevity is a gift, and I hope I have it tonight. Thank you all for having me. It's an important group. I'm a father of 4, like Michelle mentioned. I have 3 that are in college right now. I didn't think of that 20 years ago, but I have 3 in college right now and 1 college graduate. And the importance of education, can't be overstated. So the work that SEPTA does is tremendous, and I applaud all of you for your dedication and commitment. And it's an honor to follow President Jimmy Bierman. He does important work. One of the questions that came up during my interview process as I was coming on board in Fairfax County was any experience I had with civilian review panels, where civilian review boards are called different things in different jurisdictions. It was new and still is relatively new to Fairfax County, and it's new to Virginia. But I've spent my entire career interacting with civilian review panels and their equivalents, and the importance of that outside eyes and ears on the most important things we do as police officers is something that's long overdue in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And I applaud Fairfax County, President Bierman and his colleagues for taking on this important work. So I'm a true believer in it, and I see the value in it. Some of my most meaningful relationships in my career have been with school superintendents. In Baltimore City, Sonia Santelices, she's a friend, a colleague. We did a lot together. The challenges are almost constant when it comes to young people and schools, and from time to time public safety. But we would much rather not be involved in a child's life at school other than a productive presence. I've been around George Arlotto. George Arlotto is the longtime school superintendent in Anne Arundel County, Maryland. He's a friend, he's a colleague. So if there's any hesitation about my commitment to public schools in particular, but schools generally, I can tell you that my relationships with those 2 leaders have helped shape me as a leader in this profession. So because I'm a National Capital Region DMV person my whole life, I've known of the Fairfax County Police Department for many, many years. And the 2 things that I always thought I knew about Fairfax County the most were the motors unit they have, which is world-class, world-renowned motors unit, and the school resource officer program. So I've been in school resource officer environments elsewhere, Fairfax County has always been the gold standard. And I'm glad President Bierman mentioned that there, and I'm knocking on fake wood here, there's never been a complaint that the civilian review panel has had to entertain regarding a school resource officer, and that's because we choose them so carefully. So the subject matter experts that I have with me today in the room that can speak to any specifics that the group might have, Deputy Chief Bob Blakely, who's in charge of all operations on the police department, Lieutenant Deller. Lieutenant Deller is our school liaison commander, and I see him right next to our screen here. And Sergeant Choice is our SRO supervisor. So as a parent first, but as a leader in policing, I know that there are many different opinions and perspectives regarding school resource officers that probably many people on this call have. And I think those differing opinions are healthy, and they make for great conversation and always room for improvement. So I'll kind of end by saying our commitment to public safety in Fairfax County absolutely positively extends to our schools, our students with special needs, very, very special group that we're committed to serving. So whatever we can do to strengthen our relationship with SEPTA or the schools, I'm willing to do it, we're willing to do it, and roll up our sleeves and get this work done. You'll hear, and you've probably heard, that Fairfax County is one of the safest jurisdictions in the country for a jurisdiction of our size. I think Fairfax County is bigger than 8 states in America. That's still true. And you'll hear conversations about the rise in violence in big cities across America. We ended 2021 with about a 9% reduction in all crimes in Fairfax County. So what does that mean? What's a 9% reduction in crime mean? It means about 3,200 fewer crime victims. And imagine 3,200 fewer crime victims, that's meaningful. The challenge we had in 2021 in particular, which of course garners media attention, is our homicides jumped from 15 to 21. Now, those raw numbers pale in comparison to surrounding large jurisdictions, but we jumped from 15 to 21 because in 2021, and I can't prove this, Michelle, yet, but isolation, COVID, depression, family dysfunction, desperation, access to firearms, 1/3 of our homicides in Fairfax County in 2021 were adult children killing their parents or their sibling. 1/3. That's a tremendous percentage. And they've been indoors. They've all had some type of history with either a family dysfunction or behavioral crisis or mental health crisis. So we're committed to the co-responder model. We're committed to CIT for all of our cops. We get it. This is an enlightened police department. We're not perfect, but we're going to try really, really hard to be perfect. So I'll pause there because I tend to ramble, and I said brevity is a gift, and hopefully I was brief enough. So I'll be quiet now, Michelle.
Thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time and speaking with us this evening. And anytime, any questions about disability related work, we are more than happy to partner with you. And certainly as a social worker, I'm eager to hear a little bit more another time about the working on the response to mental health situations as well. So thank you again for your time. I'm going to move on now to our keynote speakers, so to speak, this evening. We have with us, as Chief Davis mentioned, Lieutenant Matthew Daler, who is the School Liaison Commander with Fairfax County Police Department. He's a 25-year veteran of the FCPD and has worked in patrol, special enforcement, and internal affairs. He holds a BA in sociology and a master's in public administration. Lieutenant Daler has been the School Liaison Commander since last summer. We also have Sergeant Brett Choice, who is the SRO Training Coordinator and Program Subject Matter Expert. He's been the School Resource Supervisor for 17 of the 51 SROs spanning the past 5 years. He has spent 19 years with the FCPD and has served as a patrol field training instructor, law enforcement instructor, school resource officer, criminal investigations detective, crisis intervention team, and crisis negotiations team leader. Sergeant Choice is married and has 3 kids who are 13, 15, and 17. So welcome to you both. I've been told that our guests have a very comprehensive presentation, so I'm going to be quiet and let them jump right in. We've been putting in the chat a link where you can submit questions, and just so you guys know, we already have over 15 questions and the presentation hasn't even started yet. So we're going to do our best to monitor the questions and try not to ask the ones that you answered during the presentation. But if we do ask ones that were answered during the presentation, please feel free to not reiterate them and just say you already talked about that, and we'll just move on from there. So I'm turning everything over to you. Thank you so much.
Good evening, everyone. I am Sergeant Brett Choice. My position is that of the School Resource Officer Supervisor. I know that most of you probably get up as early as I do, so I am going to make this comprehensive, but not put you to sleep at the same time. We will get started as Zoom works. Sometimes things work well and sometimes they don't. So if you would please just let me know if something doesn't work.
It is working. I don't know if you can change the view to your full screen. Right now it's, I think, in the presenter mode there, but it is working.
Okay, will do. Hold on. I have to take this down for a second to get to that spot.
That I will be as patient as need be.
Let's see. I've got to move this thing.
No problem.
You remember how to move it? Hide video panel, I think.
I think if you just go to view, then you should be able to do it in the presenter mode or the sharing. But, you know, technical is not my thing. I apologize.
There we go. Okay, can you see that?
Excellent, looks fantastic, thank you.
Great. So I appreciate you all being here and inviting me to present to the special education community. I love seeing that 45 plus shareholders are on the call. I've done this presentation about 100 or more times, and I've never seen that many people on a call, so that's exceptional. This presentation is designed as an overview of the SRO program. So this is me. This is the most important part of this slide are those 3 kids. I have 1 kid that has an IEP and 1 that has a 504. So special education is close to my heart. It is my goal that all students have a positive, safe learning environment with restorative justice practices, allowing them to propel to success. It is why I've stayed in this program for the past 5 years, helping reform this program, collaborating with our juvenile justice partners, local, state officials, developing training, providing training and policy that reflects our best practices and now has been memorialized into law. We've been the model. Fairfax County has been the model. This has ensured that all SROs across the state have been trained the same way. The expectations of this tonight is that you understand the SRO role in accordance with policy and law. As mentioned before, although these numbers change and change daily sometimes, we are huge. We are one of the largest public or private entities in the state. The SRO staffing, we have one commander who is a liaison with FCPS and works out of the Gatehouse Administration Building, the headquarters of FCPS. There are 3 SRO supervisors. We are the daily coach of the school resource officers and provide 24-hour crisis mitigation of FCPS incidents. We're always on call, and it is a 24-hour day job. There are 51 SROs assigned to FCPS, 25 middle and 26 high schools. There are, and this number changes too, there are 8,000 students in those schools approximately. No SROs are assigned to elementary schools, and their SRO is a designation through the state. Their goal is that of law enforcement or upholding the law. And with juveniles 12 and under, we typically don't have a role with them. So patrol officers will respond to take mandatory reports, which I'll explain later. And our community outreach officer provides education when requested to the elementary schools. The SRO program and the Memorandum of Understanding and History. The SRO program has existed for 26 years within Fairfax County Public Schools, and an MOU has always been in place. An MOU is a non-binding agreement between 2 entities to provide guidance. Both entities are required to follow agency policies and law. So it's a handshake that reflects policy and law. It establishes roles within the partnership. It allows the community to understand the roles. And as you can see, the history. So this is a video available on FCPS website, and it explains the SRO program. I hope it plays well and you can hear it.
Fairfax County Public Schools and the Fairfax County Police Department work together to make sure students have a safe learning environment. That's why every middle and high school in Fairfax County has a school resource officer, or SRO, stationed within the building. Here to help us understand the role of SROs are Officer Gray and Officer Winston. Thank you for being here.
Thank you
for having us. So first, what is a school resource officer? Are you a Fairfax County School District employee?
Actually, no, SROs are not school district employees. We're Fairfax County police officers who work inside schools rather than in a police station or driving in a patrol car. We work with students, staff, parents, and the community to make sure we maintain a safe, secure, and healthy learning environment. We want students to focus on their work and be successful. Each officer is carefully selected and trained to make sure they are the right fit for working in a school. It's actually a huge honor as a police officer to be selected as an SRO.
Okay, so what exactly do you do every day?
We're here to support a safe and positive learning environment. As an SRO, that means that we monitor school activities and events. We walk through the school and keep a visible presence throughout the day. We check the inside and the outside of the building for safety and security concerns. We want to promote a mutual respect between law enforcement, school security staff, school administrators, students, and their families.
What we don't do, Kennick, is get involved in administrative or school disciplinary issues. That is handled by school leadership. We only get involved when the actions of a student are potentially criminal in nature. And even then, unless it's an emergency situation, we will try to arrange for parents to be present, if possible, when we speak to a student. Our focus is to keep kids in school and out of the criminal justice system.
Is there anything else that you would want us to know about being an SRO?
One more important thing to know is that we don't get involved in immigration enforcement, commonly known as ICE. We don't participate in any requests for assistance for matters that are not criminal in nature within the school system. Remember, we're here to help students, not to punish or arrest them unless we absolutely have no other options.
Well, thank you guys so much for helping us understand more about being an SRO and your roles inside our schools.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If you would like to learn more about SROs in Fairfax County Public Schools,
Okay, so that last portion there about ICE was a question that was brought up as we rewrote the MOU in 2018. And the reason I bring that up is one, to ensure that everyone knows we're not involved, but two, SROs go a step further. When undocumented students are victims or witnesses in crimes, our SROs work with our victim services to provide them access to citizenship, which is an option under the law. So SROs, help all students the best they can. The SRO role overview: SROs are law enforcement officers assigned to public, middle, and high schools as mentors, liaisons, and visual deterrents in a non-confrontational setting. Our goal is to help students stay safe while collaborating with our school community to provide all students an avenue for success. SROs investigate crimes involving students in accordance with policy and law, always attempting to divert eligible student offenders while providing services to the victims through the restorative justice process. SROs are law enforcement officers, not school administrators or security, and shall not become involved in routine disruptions, discipline, or violations of school rules. SROs are supervised through the FCPD or the police department chain of command. SROs should not be assigned stationary posts or be provided assignments by school administration. SROs provide a vast array of safety and legal education to students, school staff, and parents when requested. The lesson plans come from Virginia Rules. Virginia Rules is a program run by the Virginia Attorney General's Office, the Virginia Department of Criminal Justice Services, and used by FCPS. SROs required minimum training by law. As you can see, they provide they are provided a vast array of training, and this is basic training, and then yearly they receive additional training. Just one portion of this training is crisis intervention, which is 50 hours, and then 40 hours yearly. Those trainings under law are provided by subject matter experts, and it's collaborative with Fairfax County Public Schools, the Community Service Board, otherwise known as Mental Health, and the Department of Criminal Justice Services. SROs as law educators, the Memorandum of Understanding states, in part, SROs should strive to assist with presentations for school personnel on law-related topics such as law enforcement practices, changes in relevant laws, crime trends, crime prevention, school safety strategies, and crisis response procedures. SROs may also deliver law-related education to students using lessons approved in advance by the SRO supervisor. In all cases, responding to incidents or conducting investigations will take precedent over delivery of these presentations. Here are some, but certainly not all, of the presentations they do. Partners for Safe Teen Driving. If any of you have 16-year-old kids or above, you've seen the SRO at that event. SRO school safety role. SRO shall assist administrators in developing school crisis, emergency management, and response plans. They will work with the school administrators in problem solving to prevent crime and to promote safety in the school environment. SROs are expected to collaborate with school administrators and other school personnel to support positive climate that focuses on resolving conflict, reducing student engagement with the juvenile and criminal justice system, and diverting youth from the courts when possible. mandatory reporting between, mandatory reporting law between the police and schools. Mandatory reporting states that SROs shall report to school officials any arrest of students on school property or any felony offense committed by a student, regardless of where it is committed. The law requires the SRO report to school officials the following incidents involving a student offender occurring on school property. School officials may report these or any incident in accordance with FCPS policy to the police if it's a misdemeanor. However, they shall report these incidents if it may be a felony. Assault with injury, sexual assault, stalking, threats of violence, weapons on school properties, on property, or drugs. SRO's law enforcement role. Educational and as a resource to the school community. Mandatory reporting by school officials. Visual deterrent. Victim reporting. Threats and acts of violence. Weapons. Children in need of services or supervision. Mental health. Felonious investigations such as sex crimes. And as a liaison with CPS and other law enforcement entities. School security versus SRO. School security is the role of FCPS staff for the purpose of school rule enforcement, not the SRO. SROs shall never become involved in this process. FCPS has a variety of assets to include an Office of Safety and Security with a 24-hour uniform security and monitoring center. Middle and high schools have their own security teams that work for the school's administration that is not affiliated with the police department. Students for restorative justice, or otherwise known as alternative accountability. Through a collaborative effort with FCPS, the police department, and the juvenile court, minor criminal offenses are usually handled without adjudication while providing the student restorative justice. This includes things such as assault, larceny, alcohol, marijuana. This provides mediation, a restorative yet punitive measure for the offending student while providing closure to the victim. It's a very successful program that Fairfax County did pioneer for the state. FCP officials may refer students, which does not require the police or court involvement unless subsequent offenses exist or a victim wishes to make a report to the police. When a victim is involved, both the victim and offender must agree to the involvement and the terms of restorative justice. The SRO program's perception, the school to prison pipeline. A lot of this stems from our involvement with students and furthermore, students in classrooms or disobeying rules. SROs are not involved in that. So restraint and seclusion is a big topic that has come up, especially with the special education community. Restraint and seclusion is not physical intervention under the law. However, physical intervention and restraint and seclusion, FCPS policy and Virginia law, gives school staff the ability to physically intervene with students reasonably after all avenues have been exhausted for violation of school rules. SRO shall never become involved in restraint and seclusion or the enforcement of school rules. SRO shall only physically intervene with students when a legal articulable justification exists, and after all other avenues have been exhausted. Virginia law and FCPS policy provides FCPS staff the ability to physically intervene reasonably with a student when incidental and reasonable to maintain order and control, quell a disturbance, to provide a student or to protect a student from themselves or others, to obtain drugs, weapons, or related contraband. Virginia law and police policy provides SROs the ability to physically intervene with a student when a crime has been committed and in the welfare and well-being of the general public, or has probable cause to believe the student is in need of services and or supervision, and there is a clear and substantial danger to the child's life or health. And the litmus test, and SROs are well trained in this, a substantial threat to themselves or others. And it slid off the slide because I'm sure I changed the slide. Disorderly conduct, which in Virginia law is somewhat known as disturbing the peace or putting someone in fear of assault, is not a crime on school property involving a student. And that's what was hidden there at the bottom. Students with emotional disabilities experiencing crisis. School officials routinely intervene with students experiencing emotional crisis while coordinating with parents to ensure necessary mental health services. SROs normally are not required to be involved in this process. SROs should only become involved with students experiencing an emotional crisis after all other avenues have been exhausted or exigency exists, such as an imminent threat to themselves or others. In these circumstances, with parental involvement, an SRO or any police officer may take a student into custody under an emergency custody order for the purpose of treatment through the Fairfax County Community Services Board, otherwise known as Merrifield Mental Health. This is the last case scenario when in the best interest for safety. Students with intellectual disability experiencing crisis. Physical interaction involving ID students is the responsibility of trained school staff. SRO shall avoid any physical contact with an ID student unless there is an imminent threat to the student's safety. This is always the last resort, and an example of that would be a student that has left the school and is about to run into traffic. That is the last case resort. SRO shall never take custody of an ID student for the purposes of a mental evaluation. So ID students include nonverbal, autistic, Down syndrome, etc. When all other avenues have been exhausted and the ID student is in crisis, causing an imminent threat, both the parents and the fire department should be contacted. The fire department will respond and may apply necessary medical care to safely and humanely transport the student to the hospital for evaluation and care. So that is the last case scenario, and that occurs even prior to police involvement. So SROs are well trained in the adolescent mind, and I think this is a clear reflection of that, is that their brains aren't fully developed till they're 25. And certainly as a parent, as I believe all of you are, we understand that. And daily talking with parents, they understand that. And it is the job of an SRO to have that absolute empathy for those students who are going through adolescence and dealing with daily struggles of being an adolescent. It is the job of an SRO to talk, coach, encourage students applying services to victims and restorative justice to the offenders. It is our goal to help students become productive members of society, not punish them. I always say in SRO school that it is our job to be the cool aunts and uncles, not the parents. That's the job of the school administration. So here is a video on SROs and our relations in the school community. And this video is also available on the FCPS website.
When you look at Officer Cottom, he is a big guy. He can, at first appearance, be very intimidating. But when you get to know him, when you see him laughing with students, talking about his interests, you know, that just breaks down a lot of barriers. And it helps kids to see that he is very approachable, very friendly, very caring.
I am a police officer first with the county. And basically our role is to serve as a liaison here at the school between the department and the school system, provide safety and security, just ensure that certain criminal and legal activities are not taking place here at the school. I think relationship building is pretty much the core of what SRO should be. We are a resource that's in our name, and we are basically to build relationships with the students, the staff, and the faculty here at the school. So we have better communication and kind of discuss things openly when issues do arise.
As the sponsor of the Black Student Alliance, I also know him because he's collaborated with us, particularly with our Kwanzaa celebration.
The meeting that we had with the Black Student Alliance, Officer Cottom came in and he told us about how he did STEP in college. Then he taught us a STEP routine.
I'm not just a police officer. I'm also a person. I have a family, you know, there's things I'm involved in outside of school and outside of my job. And I think that's an easy way to connect with students and faculty here at the school. So through STEP, it was something that I'm interested in and I was able to share it with students. And I think it's just a very great way to build that connection and build that relationship with students.
Well, he's just a great guy. He's a Renaissance man. He plays chess, he steps, he likes sports. And when you get to know him, he's somebody that, you know, you just really, he's infectious in terms of his positivity. So he's somebody that I'm really glad is on board here at Lake Braddock. And he's just a real positive addition to our community.
I see him as a very nice administrator, like as a kind of a friend, as just somebody who I can approach this problem.
I'm enjoying my time here at Lake Braddock. Getting to know each and every student here. You know, each day is different. And I've had a good time so far.
Developing student relations. This is the McLean High School SRO. He was selected our last regular school year by popular vote from the 2019 graduating class to give the convocation address. This was the first time in 21 years students selected a non-educator. This is huge. And the reason the students and the school community love this officer, Officer Davis, is because he loves them. He engages with the kids. He's at every lunch sitting and eating with the kids. He is out talking to them about their days in the hallway. When they're having a bad day, he talks to them or they talk to him. He performs in the halftime shows with the kids at the sporting events. He plays sports with them and PE and builds with them in tech ed. And he provides an arrangement of legal education. And this is just an example of the exceptionalism in the SRO program, but this is what we expect of all our SROs. So here are the statistics, and the reason I show you 18-19 is because that was our last regular school year. As you can see, it's less than 1% of the student population that are criminal offenses investigated by SROs and forwarded to the juvenile court. And you can see these numbers went down. That year, narcotics offenses, which the majority were marijuana, and alcohol offenses, were required by the law to be reported to SROs. 61 of these incidents were allowed to be handled by restorative justice, so they were. However, with law change and reform, currently year to date, which is a staggering low number, we've only had 20 incidents referred to the court for disposition. And we have had 0 physical interventions or uses of forces involving a school resource officer. And that bottom number, as you can see, 88 school threats were reported and investigated. That number stays about the same. Fear of school violence. Mitigating school threats is our #1 priority. We know this is the community's #1 fear. So the community perception is the fear in the school community that no one can do enough to keep students safe. And then there's another fear that the schools will turn into a prison-like atmosphere leading to a juvenile justice gateway. We know both of these fears exist among parents. So here is an example of a school threat. They happen almost daily. An act of terror is defined as to cause extreme fear, and we see these in every incident released to the public, usually through social media, and usually not the offender. This was written in pencil on a toilet paper dispenser in a boys' bathroom in a Fairfax County high school. It was then photographed by an uninvolved student and posted on social media. This post spread throughout the community and to the media within minutes, causing widespread fear and panic that tragedy was imminent. So this was right at the end of the school year. 3/4 of the school's population did not attend for the remainder of the school year, to include graduation events. This incident was never believed to be a credible threat. It was a size of a $50 written in pencil, but when it was posted to social media, that's all parents and students saw was school shooting on Friday, 8th of June, prepare. So student threat assessments are our top priority. SROs and school administrators are well trained as they're part of the member of the threat assessment team. We know this is the most important part of preventing acts of violence, and that their job involving threat assessments are instrumental in stopping that. And the law does give them the ability to participate and to provide information back and forth. FERPA is the Federal Education Rights and Privacy Act. FERPA protects the privacy and information of students' educational records. School staff is prohibited from inappropriately disclosing a student's educational records beyond those who have a legitimate educational purpose. So the police, SROs, exemptions are directory information, which is basic information such as a picture, name, address, school schedule, but not the protected student information. And then, of course, in a threat assessment, when handling any cases of threats or concerns about potential violence or self-harm, and then disclosure for health and safety emergencies. Dissemination of student records to police requires a search warrant when the above does not exist, such as IEPs, disciplinary records, written statements. However, it does not extend to communications, observations, or other forms of information that are obtained by faculty and staff. So I will now open it up for questions. And if any of you would like to ask questions to me directly, feel free to send me an email after this presentation.
All right, we have a long list of questions here. So I'm attempting to sort through them and try to run out some of the duplicates and so forth. So if you've got your contact information up there, let's kind of jump in with some of these questions. Whew, these are fantastic questions. Several people asked about what type of disability and trauma training do SROs have? And in a related question, you had talked, for example, about students with intellectual disabilities. How do you know if a student has, so to speak, an invisible disability?
So first, SROs and certainly current SROs receive various training, and we try to keep it fresh each year for current SROs, and all SROs attend a basic SRO school. The first requirement of any training is that the person given it is a subject matter expert. We use different presenters, sometimes social workers from FCPS or school psychologists. Sometimes we always use one of our supervisors, and it's usually Steve Black from the Community Services Board, which is Fairfax County Mental Health, and he is our daily partner in crisis intervention. And we use different partners, which from the Virginia Department of Criminal Justice Services, which they employ subject matter experts to come teach at various police academies and schools and SRO schools. So those are the educators, and then they have a comprehensive presentation on disability, which includes various things such as the autism spectrum all the way to Down syndrome, and what kids experience on a daily basis, what they see in the mental health community, and what they know to work. So it's a vast array, and it is usually 3 hours yearly in addition to the basic course, the basic 40 hours of training that is all encompassing. And then the department also puts on various trainings, and the majority of my SROs have 15 plus years of experience. So they have received this training, as well as have been involved in crisis daily for their entire career, and they are selected because of their exceptionalism in dealing with community and trauma. So that's first. And then the second question was, can you remind me?
How do you identify students?
So one of the slides hit on it, but SROs are totally involved with their administrative team in identifying potential crisis and discussing it in students' behaviors and propensity for students' behaviors. So if SROs understand that as specifically, I can say it's a common occurrence. A student has maybe hit puberty and can't express what's going on inside their body, and they've begun to become more aggressive with school staff. That is the job, and this is what they discuss. So the crisis plans, the How do we handle this situation as it goes forward? And so students and their behaviors are discussed, and the plans to mitigate those incidents to ensure that, one, the child's addressed in the least amount of physical interaction, and two, with the best resources. So if something like that is starting to happen, where a special education teacher is reporting that a student is becoming more aggressive, then that is the job of that parent and that special education administrator to go to the parents and say, we're seeing this, and we believe the child needs more resources. So the police don't usually become involved. And as you could see, we're not involved in interaction with those students too frequently. It is, but in all things, the threat assessment or the prior crisis mitigation is the priority, so it doesn't come to that point. And that has been successful. The debriefs, the tabletops, and discussing things before they occur to have a plan in place.
And for clarification, I'm not sure if I misread your slide that was about FERPA and what information the SROs have access to. Do they have access to students' IEPs or not have access to students'
No,
IEPs?
they do not. The only time that would come into play is in a emergency scenario that students made a threat of self-harm or to harm others. That information could be communicated. But no, IEP information is not something that SROs have access to regularly.
Okay, we had a few questions that I'm going to try to sort of merge together a little bit, referring, for example, to what kind of training do SROs have on interacting with students with autism, students with complex communication needs, and students who go into like a fight, flight, or freeze response in school, which could include behavior that isn't typical of that student, like eloping or lashing out, or having a tantrum. So what sort of training do the staff have regarding these behaviors and these particular populations?
So as a reminder that SROs are law enforcement and not involved in these incidents at all, unless there is an exigent circumstance, such as the student, and usually parents are involved. The student has fled the building, it is running into traffic. The student is now in an emotional disturbance where they could harm themselves or harm others. And these are very, very infrequent scenarios. And these are discussed prior with school staff as to how to mitigate those and that we won't become involved. But they are trained extensively on how to interact with those, and it's a 50-hour training. So initially for crisis intervention, and then yearly they get 3 hours on that. So it is extensive and they are trained in it. But they also are well trained, and their job is to mitigate their involvement through planning with school officials for such circumstances, as they're not going to be involved, so they have to apply their training. So I think the question may refer to school officials, and I will refer that question back to the schools if it refers to school officials. But SRs do not become involved unless there's an exigent circumstance.
Okay. We had several questions related to bias and bias training in terms of, and I want to try to summarize all the questions accurately here. Are SROs given any kind of supplemental implicit bias training? There are what kind of racial and ethnic equity and bias training do SROs have, and so forth?
Yes, absolutely. So one, as I mentioned early in the presentation, SROs are now required by law for the to be trained in the slide for that I showed for training, and implicit bias and related topics are now required by Virginia law for school resource officers specifically, but officers in general. So throughout the years, officers receive basic bias training, and then SROs receive 2 hours yearly of training related to bias, implicit bias, and then now the department also requires all officers be trained in it, and we collaborate with FCPS and use their instructor for SRO specific.
Okay, I'm going to back up just a tiny bit again on the training towards working with students with disabilities. How in-depth is that training, and how many hours of training do you have on disability, and what type of experts give those trainings? I know you mentioned consultation with the CSB, but what type of background, who gives those trainings?
We one is a school FCPS social worker, and then one is a CSB instructor. In past years, we've had law enforcement officers who have children with disabilities come in and present that are subject matter experts on the topic. Not that we're totally restricted to law enforcement instructors, but we do have to have subject matter experts. So we look to mental health professionals and school professionals to give that training. And then also we have every SRO is required to be crisis intervention trained, which encompasses all of that for a 50-hour training. So they do a minimum of 2 hours a year with an initial 50 hours, which encompasses a variety of training with those in a variety of positions that have also experienced mental health or disabilities and explain their mental health or disabilities, and then they go through practical scenarios to experience those experience of those in trauma or crisis with those disabilities or in any kind of crisis scenario.
Okay, thank you. I would love to, when we're all done, to be able to send you this list of questions and see if it's possible for us to highlight and get any kind of responses back from you afterwards as well, because there are just for our audience to know, there are over 45 questions that I'm scanning through and just trying really hard to pick and choose. There are several questions that relate to what are SROs and the police doing to pretty much improve relationships in terms of students' opinions about having police in their schools. Trying to summarize these questions. What do you do what do you do to improve when students come in with pretty strong negative feelings about having police in school, or when parents are, as you mentioned in your presentation, feeling a lot of legitimate fear and concern about the school to prison pipeline? How do you work to improve that?
Well, one, we are always willing to present, and we present, SROs present to students when requested to classes and to any presentation involving students, such as civics classes. Quite frequently ask them to come in and talk about current events related to law enforcement. And they'll have students, each student, specifically high schools, routinely will have a newspaper or a magazine, and it's a topic that comes up every year, and it's actually extremely routine that they are asked to do a Q&A. So that's SROs. And then, of course, I'm here tonight, and I am always willing to present on this program and answer the community's questions and to respond to their concerns. Because just as I said before, the chief said before, this is important to us. These are our kids too, and we want to ensure that everyone feels that their kids are safe. Not just, and it's a real concern, not just from other students or from community, but also from the police. We want everyone to feel comfortable that we are doing it the right way, that we continue to reform and to evaluate our program, and to keep students safe.
Yeah, Michelle, if I could just chime in real quick. You know, we get comments from the community, from parents. Sometimes they're concerned about the officers being in the school, and we try and send as much information back as we can, just describing the program like we have tonight, and how the officers are there as, you know, another role model, another adult, hopefully trusted adult. And encourage them to spend a lot of time trying to break down those barriers, just on a personal level, much as we do in all the communities, just to show that the officer's a person, and in a lot of cases a parent as well, and they can connect on all different levels, you know, talking about all different topics with students. That, you know, there's always a chance to make that relationship something that it wasn't the day before.
You're muted, Michelle.
You win the game. That's the little game I play. Congratulations. There have been multiple questions on when do SROs get involved? When do they have to versus when can they, or when can't they? I know you had a slide on that, and one of the questions came to the wording of the choice of the word may, like that officers may get involved in XYZ. So
may versus shall. Shall means have to or never. May means when. So there's a may when exigency exists. Typically, that's when may would be that they would get involved. So extreme circumstances, and they are well trained, and they only become involved when exigency exists, and that it typically involves a threat to a student or others. As I said in the emotional disability slide, and it is a a daily occurrence that schools do become involved in emotional disabilities, and it is the last case scenario for a school resource officer to become involved.
So I think that mostly answers another question, which is if an SRO witnesses some kind of an issue in school but has not been contacted by staff to get involved, do they take action or do they sit back and wait?
There is only one case for that, and it would be witnessing violence. And they are always going to refer, it depends on the scale of the violence, but we would say a fight in the hallway. It would be probable cause of assault, so they're likely going to break that up, but refer it to school officials. And if it were to dictate, such as a victim says, I want the police to investigate this, or victims' parents, that would be the only way that a school resource officer would become involved. So that is probably the most common scenario, would be two kids fighting in the hallway, and an SRO may break that fight up. And certainly if a school official is nearby, it is the responsibility of the school official, not the police officer. And typically SROs are in the company while out and about, in the company of school officials. So they are not the immediate person to step into anything. It would be the school official. But if it just happened, they were walking from one spot to the other and a fight broke out, they're not going to allow kids to continue to fight, because that is the elements of an assault. But they would immediately refer to school officials and not become involved unless requested.
So then, hooking onto that, somebody's asking, is it true that anytime an SRO gets involved in a situation related to student discipline, that charges, that they're required to file charges regardless of the school administration's actions?
I'll go a step further on that, and I'm glad that question was asked. SROs do not, it is the biggest misconception that SROs file charges. The SROs investigate reported incidents when their involvement is required by law, or we have a victim reporting a crime. They forward their findings to a juvenile justice specialist in the juvenile court known as a juvenile intake officer, which has no relation to the police department other than they're part of the juvenile justice system. The intake officer determines if the juvenile is eligible for restorative justice, diversion, or based on a formula that evaluates past offenses, the severity of the crime, victim impact, services necessary for the involved, may send it before the court for adjudication, but everything is handled with a fair and impartial approach. SROs hardly ever refer anything before the court. They don't refer before the court. They write it up and send it to juvenile intake when it's required. But if there is not so with misdemeanor crimes such as assault, if it is not being reported that this is a subsequent offense, that they've already been through restorative justice for this, SROs, it would be the school saying this is subsequent, we've already been through restorative justice. They would send it to that intake officer, and if that intake officer determines that it is still eligible for restorative justice, they will refer to restorative justice or diversion, which is the next step, but still does not adjudicate that kid. So every student is given the opportunity for multiple restorative justice avenues prior to be adjudicated. And the SRO does not make the charge. They sign the petition because they're proffering the facts, but they are not deciding.
Okay. If a student's actions are deemed to be a manifestation of their disability, then how does that change any kind of situation where SROs are involved?
It would, so there are cases where potentially records would be obtained through a search warrant, or they would be provided through a threat assessment. And the juvenile justice system has changed tremendously throughout my career, but certainly over the past 5 years. And the goal is always services. So a Commonwealth's attorney, who is the prosecutor, may take a look at those. It's not going to stop a law enforcement. If a student is a threat to themselves or others, it's not going to stop us from investigating and mitigating that threat, but it's going to change how the juvenile justice system handles that child, because it does play into it. And certainly Commonwealth's attorneys in the past have said, we are not going to prosecute because of the student's mental health and or intellectual disability. And some of that is written into law, that we have to take that into account. So we're always looking to divert juveniles, always looking to put the safety of all children into account while providing the offending juvenile services. I mean, that's the goal, is to make them productive members of society. And we know that all children are different. You know, I have 3 and they're all different and they all do different things. And, you know, and you have to adapt to that different child. So it's always taken into account, and even in their police report, what information is communicated to them about that child goes forward. And usually before a petition is issued, which a petition means goes before the court, the assistant director contacts me and we go over the case. So it is not like it was 15 years ago, where if a juvenile commits a crime, that if they were an adult, they're going to court. It is now that the opposite, that unless that juvenile is a threat to themselves or someone else, or it is a severe crime and has to be adjudicated, that it goes before a judge. And those are very uncommon.
One question, this one's pretty straightforward, I think. Who does the SRO report directly to in the school?
Nobody. They report to me and my 2 colleagues, and anything that may arise as an issue, I'm involved in, or my 2 colleagues. So no school officials do SROs report to.
I know that we need to be wrapping up, so I'm just trying to pick a couple that might be a little bit quicker on responses here too. Specific types of examples of students, things that they've observed with SROs, and how that impacts the student's comfort level. For example, a student feels uncomfortable because they were questioned in the hall when their substitute teacher dismissed them early. Or another student has observed an SRO searching students' backpacks while the students are in the bathroom. What are the students' rights regarding things like the backpack searches, and how do students' voices and reactions and responses get conveyed to you all? What's the avenue for getting student feedback about the SRO presence?
Well, I can tell you that I have presented to, I'll get it wrong, but a panel of student students that collaborate with the superintendent's office. I can't remember the panel, and they were able to ask an abundance of those questions. And they also all are able to go talk to their school resource officer, and their school resource officer should be presenting to them on a regular basis, as well as be available to them during the SR&R, the Students' Rights and Responsibilities, which they go over each year. So a lot of that comes out during that each year. And I can tell you, after many, many years in Fairfax County Public Schools, as well as being a police officer, not saying that it is every case, but I have never seen a student that appeared intimidated by me because I was in uniform or scared to talk to me. Obviously, this is one of the only times I'll give my opinion, but I find that students are very open to talking to me and their SRO, and in many cases, as just a brief example of today, and I don't like to give examples because students' rights are very private, is that the student wanted to talk to his SRO as opposed to his parents while experiencing crisis, and only wanted to be with the SRO through that crisis incident because he trusted that SRO. And I can tell you that has happened many times in my presence. I always ask questions. It is my job to not only teach and coach my SROs, but to keep tabs on them. That is the job of that I have. So I routinely monitor their performance, and kids are always willing to tell you about when an SRO says, "This is my boss," they'll tell you how they feel.
Is there any form, I'm sorry to interrupt, is there any formal system set up or any kind of standard formal channel for students to give their feedback?
There is. The schools do surveys, as well as the Department of Criminal Justice and the Department of Education do surveys, a separate survey, and it asks those questions. It asks, do you feel that your SRO keeps the school safe? Do you feel that SROs are needed in schools? And that feedback is imperative. I have to know that students feel we're making a difference and that they trust their SRO and that they feel that there is a value to that. I want to know that what we are doing is making an impact in those child's lives, or possibly we're not doing it correctly and we need to go back to the drawing board. So what I can say is that so far I've seen overwhelming support from our school community, which includes parents, students, school administrators, and we shouldn't take that for granted. And we are always looking to collaborate and to make them feel safe in our presence.
And just following up really quickly on that last point, it's great to know that these surveys exist. Are they required to be given to all students every year? How is it determined when that feedback is given?
I'll refer to the schools on that because we don't give them, but the Department of Criminal Justice is required to take down this data. And I collaborate regularly with the coordinator at the Department of Criminal Justice Services, who ends up writing the law and compiling the data and best practices. And she's attended our SRO school and I've attended hers, and we collaborate for best practices. So she is the one that gets the data back, and an independent survey is conducted through the Department of Criminal Justice Services, which is a Virginia agency under the governor. And the goal is to make sure that not that Fairfax County or Botetourt County or Roanoke is in the best light, but that we're all doing it the right way. And that was the reason that position came about, is to ensure that all of Virginia is getting the same services.
Gotcha. All right, we are over on time, and I still have more and more questions. So I would love to send these questions over to you.
Absolutely.
And we can see about trying to get some of the answers, and we can post them in our website and so forth. So just for our audience also, we had some questions about, will the presentation be available afterwards? We are recording it, so we post all of our presentations on our YouTube channel. So people can certainly go back and access the slides that way. If you are interested in sending them to us, we're happy to be able to forward them out as well. But if not, people can look at them through the recording. Yeah, so much information and so many good questions here still that we didn't have time for. I'm trying to digest it all. So thank you very much to both of you for your time this evening. We could probably have this go on for hours.
I appreciate all the questions. I appreciate all the participation. As I said, I've done these forums many times, and this is the most people and the most questions I've received. So I am certainly appreciative of that.
Well, it would be wonderful if it's possible for me to get these questions over to you and for us to get back. Clearly, this is an area of great concern and interest amidst our population. So, I'm really thrilled that so many people turned out, and I hope that folks got at least some of their questions answered and got some new takeaways tonight. So on that note, we're gonna wrap things up. Would you be able to put up your slide one more time that has your contact information as well?
Certainly.
Okay, thanks.
I think Chief Davis just turned his camera back on. He may have some closing remarks.
All right, I'm gonna put my tech skills to work after 9 o'clock.
Sarge, and Michelle, thank you. Those are my closing remarks. Thank you, everyone. Very meaningful conversation, and we'll do more in the future.
Thank you again for listening in, and I'll be sure to get those questions to you as well. I think it's important for you to be hearing all the questions and concerns that parents have too, to really get that ground sense of what kind of questions people are.
Sorry, it keeps resetting.
Did it just fly through there? we can put that information out as well. So again, thank you to both of you, Lieutenant Daylor and Sergeant Choice, for your time tonight. We really, really do appreciate the community collaboration, and please don't hesitate to reach out to us with anything that we can do to help you all in terms of continued education and learning more about our students and our population.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thank you, and thank you for your service. We do appreciate it. Thank you.